Hello, welcome to the Mark Attwood Show, Adventures in a Cosmic Suit. Today we're going to talk about UFOs. I know we've talked about UFOs quite a bit, but I never get bored of it. Do you? But what I like to do on this show is bring in people that know more than me. And what better than to bring in a ufologist with multiple decades experience. Please welcome the drum roll. I'm just trying to wait for her to join. Here she is, Beverly Trout. She's nearly there. Hello, Beverly. Okay, that's not working too well. It was working a minute ago. Hello, Beverly.
Hello, Mark.
Earth to Beverly. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Well, it's not Earth to Beverly. It's island to Beverly. Island to Iowa.
Got it.
So, Beverly, you have been investigating UFOs for a number of years. I don't want to say how many. I think I heard 27 somewhere. I don't know if that's correct. Is that still correct?
28 for MUFON as an investigator. And then I decided to go as an independent researcher. So it's now been 30 years and continuing, actually. I have, cases on my plate right now. So, and that's fine. That makes life extremely interesting.
I was going to say, life cannot be boring when you're studying something so fascinating.
Well, true. And the phone calls that come in and the resulting dialogue can be not only important to me as far as getting information, but also important to the caller because they've just been faced with high strangeness. And there needs to be some kind of dialogue and understanding of what's typical and what's not typical, etc. So,
yeah, I was saying to somebody the other day that I've become known locally as the UFO guy, and I find that quite amusing. People look at you out the corner of their eye like, "Here's that weirdo." But I sent you an email telling you that where I am was the headquarters of the UFO Society of Ireland for 20 years. There was a UFO crash here in '96. It's known throughout the whole country as the UFO hotspot of Ireland. There's portals in the lake. It's just, and I'm here, and I feel so blessed to be here because every time I look up, I see UFOs almost every night.
Well, you can be the go-to guy.
Well, yeah. The thing is, go-to for what? Because I don't actually know exactly what's going on. But how did you get started? What started you? What did you do before, and when did you first have your first UFO encounters or experiences?
Well, I was married to a farmer for many, many years. And actually, of course, I had been having kind of dreams that indicated that, oh, there's a UFO, I'm driving down a road and there's a UFO following parallel to me, at ground level. So, you begin to get a little bit suspicious about those things. And in 1966, I had an experience that kind of pointed me at least into opening up my own awareness. And, but when you're on the farm and you have a family and so on, you can get really busy and push things aside. In other words, push reality aside. And so, however, in 1966, on the farm, which was only about 25 minutes from downtown Des Moines, Iowa, which is the capital city of the state, it was what I would call probably close to, well, it was at least nautical dusk, the mid kind of a dusk in the evening. And we had a dairy herd. My husband was still in the milk house. And we also had what was known as a milking parlor, which is where you bring the cows in and so on. At any rate, I had been down to the milking parlor and I was coming up through the barnyard toward the house. And I saw a light plane off, in the distance, and I could hear the motor and all that sort of thing. And then my husband came into the farmyard, having, finished up his chores. And here comes this light across the creek that was right adjacent to our feedlots. And we're watching this silent, slow moving, maybe 10 to 15 miles per hour object, make its way across the creek. And it was only about maybe 50 feet above treetop level. So we're probably looking at maybe 100 feet altitude. Got directly across the road from us and then took off at great speed, straight north. And it had been moving kind of at a diagonal in order for us to view it. So my husband he and I are standing there, not saying anything for a bit as we watch this. And then he mutters, "We better not make too much out of this," And here's the inappropriate response that you often get when investigating a sighting. And then the witness will tell me, but we've never talked about it since. That's the inappropriate response, because an appropriate response would be to excitedly discuss the whole thing, blah, 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 with your fellow witness and all that sort of thing. Okay, so now this is on a Saturday night, by the way, with my husband and myself, the night before Easter. And for the rest, we went in the house. We had 2 young kids at that time, and we didn't say a word about it that night. So we had our own inappropriate response. Next morning, he's at around 6 o'clock in the morning. He's in the milk parlor where he had a phone, and I'm up at the house, and he calls me and he said, "Is there anything in the Sunday paper about what we saw last night?" So, suddenly, the floodgates had been opened a bit. Now, I have other cases where there's been this, as I said, inappropriate response. And of course, there was nothing in the paper and we didn't know who to report it to and so on. However, on a dairy farm, a milk hauler comes every other day, and we had a 1,000-gallon tank, and, they empty it out and take it to the local processor. And so the milk hauler came, and we were in the milk house as he was doing his thing. And my husband proceeded to tell him what we had seen on Saturday night. And he proceeded to tell us. And he was a man of integrity, of course, and that a relative of his on a farm about 3.5 miles away had actually landed by railroad tracks which ran back of that farmer's buildings. So, they were doing a dual operation that night. Dual targeting, you might say. When I say targeting, I'm not saying that in any kind of a harmful way. I'm saying that they wanted to produce an awareness of some sort among certain individuals in that neighborhood. And so there you have it. So, that kind of stuff paved the way for finally in 1991, I began to, think, whoa, got to do something here. And the investigations began. And then in 93, I should make clear, I did a series of hypnosis sessions with a psychiatrist in Iowa who did understand the UFO phenomenon and so on, and the abduction sort of thing. And so that was somewhat illuminating, but I also began to have some conscious encounter. So, that's kind of the tale that wags this dog anyway. You know, we need to keep inquiring, of course, always. And so I'm still inquiring, still, you know, so far, there's some understanding on my part, so that when I speak with witnesses, I do have something to say concerning their concerns. For one thing, you know, if somebody is really upset by some sort of an encounter, and we have much of that in Iowa, as everywhere, you know, I can point out, but you're okay, aren't you? And one thing that I am really very concerned about is, and I'm sorry about, because I'm seeing people that I've respected and think are sincere, but there is a tendency, a rather strong tendency, on the part of some pretty well-known individuals to broad brush trash certain AT groups. Big mistake, big. And so, you know, yeah, okay, in all of these groups, you know, whether you're talking about Pleiadians or Andromedans or Greys or whatever, you know, or reptilians. Excuse me, folks, but you know, there are friendlies and unfriendlies in every group. And it's something to be aware of and not do the broad brush trashing. The reptilians, hey, because that's the one that gets the most.
Yeah.
And hey, you know, not right. I've been in the presence of reptilians a number of times, many. And I've been, you know, where there are several representatives of several groups on board the same craft, you know, working together, etc. This is just a huge concern of mine, and I'm sorry that people are doing it. The other thing I'm really concerned about is the subject of hybrids. I know I am personally acquainted with many hybrids, including myself. So what? And that's what I, you know, and that is what I say to hybrids that I interact with. They're nice people. I know reptilian hybrids. They're fine. They're peaceable people. They want to get along. They're nice. To put a supposedly ordinary word on it. And so be careful, folks, when you broad brush it, you're making a huge mistake. You know, yeah, we need to get on a more level playing field, more even playing field with these ETs, because they are in control when you're on board. And, you know, sometimes they can exercise control on the ground as far as that goes. But that, you know, but, you know, it just, and this is not where truth lies. In the broad brush trashing.
Well, you've mentioned lots of things there, and it's all amazing. Now I'm going to try and unpick it a little bit, because one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you is because of your vast experience, and I think that that's a really important thing to get out to as many people as possible, because we, you know, more and more people are seeing these things, and it's not, I don't get laughed at as much as I used to. Which is a big indicator, and people are experiencing things recently, especially that are making them question everything. So there's lots and lots of things that you said there when we jumped through a sort of 55-year history very quickly. Firstly, all racism is formed out of ignorance, right? So you're talking about an interstellar type of racism, and that's basically because of people's ignorance, because a lot of people, even watching my channel, are still learning about the different types and different species, and there's supposedly thousands of them. And so it's quite a big job for people to get their head around if they haven't actually met them or seen them. Now, you've just said that you are a hybrid yourself. Let's start there. How did you find that out, and what are you?
Well, how I found it out, and really, this isn't something you go looking for, but well, at least I suppose maybe some people do, but at any rate, I am acquainted, of course, with long term, as a matter of fact, with several different psychics who do not know each other. And, they haven't met, etc. Well, I'll take a couple of them met on board one night, but that's a different kind of at any rate, and from all directions, they're giving me the so-called, makeup of myself. So from that direction, and I've never gotten any, and actually from my own experience, I know that I've been, in the company of different types. So, you could say, okay, using me as an example on hybrids, if you don't mind my getting into this at this point. Let's say, okay, as I just said, yeah, I'm a hybrid, as well as I know a whole lot of hybrids, reptilian hybrids included. And, so first thing, of course, is, as I said, so what? We're all here to learn. And that, by the way, that includes full aliens, and there are many on the planet, hybrids and full humans. So, we're in the same boat in that regard. So at any rate, okay, let's say, okay, which I did just say, I'm a hybrid. All right, that's fine. Getting beyond the so what. So let's say I'm a Pleiadian. Beverly is a Pleiadian. Well, Beverly is still Beverly in this lifetime. Learning, peaceable, wanting others to thrive, even in the face of high strangeness in their lives. Wanting people to face reality as much as they can manage and tolerate. Okay, but I'm still Beverly. Now, let's say I'm an Andromedan. I'm still Beverly. And I'm only partially whatever, as a hybrid. So, okay, let's say I'm a gray. Yeah, okay, still Beverly. Still an individual. Let's say I'm a reptilian. I'm still Beverly. I'm still that individual. Spiritually oriented. Doing my best not to trump on anybody else's life path, but wanting to help as far as they will allow me to, dialogue with them, interact in whatever creative way that they consider creative, as well as actually being creative. I'm still Beverly. And that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's the way it is with other hybrids. Now, just a few days ago, one of the individuals whom I have greatly respected lumped hybrids in with the bad ETs. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, you're going down a rabbit hole. You don't, comprehend what is really taking place. And I actually look at my reaction to that with the realization that this person has interacted with those who have broad brush trashed, mainly the reptilians. Not wise.
Mm.
When you look back, okay, you and I are sitting here dialoguing, and we're both sitting here with a reptilian cortex in our brain.
Mm-hmm.
Then when you look at the ancient civilizations all over the planet, whether you're talking Egypt, India, Central America, South America, whatever, the serpent is a big player.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the Christian religion, big player. Okay, then in Eastern thought, you've got, in the Western world, we tend to label the energy centers that are associated with our endocrine gland system as chakras. Energy centers that are very powerful when they're activated into a kind of a high vibration, etc. Well, the street name, common name, in India, for instance, it's called Kundalini.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we use that phrase or that label as well. But the street name, the common name is serpent energy.
Yep.
Bad idea to broad brush. Okay, then you look at, for instance, the American Medical Association.
Mm-hmm.
Their logo is now a single serpent on a staff. It used to be two of them on a staff, but now for several years they've had a single. Okay, there's a certain, you can have, excuse the expression, snakes in the grass, or you can have serpents of wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And we better understand that we've got considerable serpents of wisdom. Yeah, we may have some snakes in the grass. I mean, I've got cases that indicate, well, for instance, ETs, yeah, they can be a mixed bag. I've got cases both ways that I've handled. And it just, this is huge, I think, to understand. I want people to understand in an objective way, not in a fear-based from a fear-based platform.
Yeah, well, that's why I wanted to talk to you, because if we're going to move into the intergalactic community, which I think we are, we need to learn about this stuff. And so let's be specific about the reptilians, because obviously because of Draco, as most people know them, that have taken some steps towards this. Some people that have no idea they exist at all, but the ones that have taken steps towards it, they'll talk about the Draco, the reptilian Queen of England, all the sacrifices, etc., all being driven by that. But I've heard that there are good reptilians out there, but I don't know much about them. So maybe you could fill us in.
Well, to me, the majority of the reptilian ETs, hey, on the positive side, yeah, there may be some unfriendlies. Hey, and this is the case in every group. You're not going to find 100%. Obviously, it's apparent, I think, from the research of others that I have looked into, researchers of long-term standing that I really respect. There are, they want us to step up to the plate, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so you have all of this, and it just, so the reptilians, okay. Now, consider the possibility that it kind of appears that there may be some indigenous lizard people here before us. Now, I can't, confirm that 100%, but this does seem a little bit indicated, and there may be some. So, I'm not really necessarily saying that the majority of those are squeaky clean, but there may be even some of those who might be okay. You have to kind of, there's been too much flat statements, broad brush flat statements.
Yeah.
And we actually, aren't we onto or into building relationships on this planet? Certainly, yes, we do need to get on a more even playing field, as I said before, with those off planet. They are advanced technology wise. They do have a consciousness technology, which seems to be somewhat advanced over what we display, most of the time at any rate. And by the way, that does not necessarily mean that they are spiritually advanced over us, maybe technologically, but although there may be, of course, those who are. In our own history, when the so-called atomic age came along, we did not advance spiritually. We learned how to, in a much more sophisticated fashion, beat up on each other. I'm talking, the nuclear age, etc. So, we can understand that this might also be a factor in some of the groups. Building relationships, we need to be careful how we label what has gone on and hope for a better going on into the future.
I agree. Do you want to see one of my protectors here? Is
You're right there with some really colorful. Yes.
Yeah, he's beautiful.
Yeah.
Dragon protector. Yeah, I think the issue is that because people have not met them, or they have not necessarily, I mean, some people have, and you talked about being on the ship or being on the ships and knowing some of these hybrids, and that would be, possibly the reason why people are like that at the moment. But we do have to explore this more and get more proof. I think people want of exactly who these people are, because there's just a vast array of information out there that it's, I think one of the things that I sense from people during this time is that they don't know who to trust with the information. So there are lots of people online saying, yeah, I've seen a UFO. Yeah, I've been on a UFO. Yes, I'm channeling this person. I'm channeling that person.
Yeah.
And, and it's always drawings. It's never a picture on your phone. And because of that, there are levels of people that they just don't know really. And, so I'd like to know, if possible, how you went from being on a farm, seeing that beautiful light, to actually getting on a ship. How did that happen? And it sounds like you've done it more than once.
Well, and let me go back a second to something that you just said that reminded me. Some folks think they have not had an encounter.
Good point.
They really don't know. Because for many years, hey, it was smothered from me. They've been taking me since I was a child, and I'm so old that this takes you back at least to the 30s and maybe into the late 20s. Okay, so, now the hypnosis sessions, of course, revealed, but there were things that happened in my childhood that, thinking back then, that kind of thing. So, yeah, and they'll say, well, I don't remember anything. And, and I'll say, well, so far you don't remember. And in fact, I have a current case where I'm being told that they want her to remember because she's pretty highly advanced in some things, but just has kept herself kind of ignorant on a conscious level, that kind of thing. Now, you're wondering from how on the farm to all of this. Well, let's see. I was divorced in the 70s and became quite a ballroom dancer as I didn't know a step at that point in my life after I'd been married legally married for 27 and a half years. And so, you know, hey, I don't know, doors just began to open as far as consciousness and who I was meeting and so on. I was mowing the lawn one day in 1966. I'll refer back to that. And as I was mowing the lawn, something said, "You're going to die young." Well, obviously I didn't do that, because I stopped the mower, went in the house, called a neighbor who lived about 3 miles away, did not know why I was calling her, found out she had just come back from a Edgar Casey conference at Lee's Summit, Missouri. And, and, you know, I drove up to her house because she had the book that had come out about him, or one of the books. There's a whole library of them, and I've got most of them. You know, and had read it by that night, and it was like, whoa, huge, you know, opening doors and all that kind of stuff. So you see, all of this was in motion, and as it happened in 1966 in the Des Moines, Iowa area, it was as if a psychic came to town from California. Fred Kimball, I think was his name. It's been a long time ago, folks. And so, but you know, it got some people together. And of course, I had just come into this information from this neighbor, and we're all gathering. And so it was just like a little mini explosion of a consciousness in the Des Moines area. And, you know, one thing led to another, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, we had the sighting. Yeah. And so on. And so, you know, but even then, you know, I parked any of my own experiences. See, I didn't have the conscious memories at that point, as the conscious stuff started to happen back in the 90s. They figured I was ready.
Yeah.
You know, when they came in this motel room in Winnemucca, Nevada, 2 of them, on September, well, it would have been in the early morning hours, September 6, 1993. You know, they woke me up first, of course, and I'm laying there in the bed, and then they're allowing me to watch them, the 2 of them, there was a female and a male, come right through the wall, and they're then very nicely walk into the room and seat themselves at chairs, you know, that were to the left side of the bed. So, you know, all of these things kind of, well, it gets your attention.
Yes.
And obviously, you know, okay, my mental and emotional, I was extremely conscious. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But, you know, it's also obvious to me that they had my mental and emotional processes regulated over a certain spectrum. And hey, I was feeling fine, you know. No, I mean, it was a big deal, but it was, hey, that's fine. You know, this is great, blah, blah, blah. And so there you go.
Fantastic.
I don't know. Sometimes I recognize that, you know, you'll say a word and in your question, and then I'll want to go off on that word rather than directly back at you. So
that's fine.
You can always draw me back to the point, you know.
No, that's fine. That's fine, dude. That's the way I like it. That's the best. They're the best chats. I mean, these experiences are. It's interesting about you saying how they get locked up and they come to you to release that when you're at a certain point of consciousness.
Yes. Yeah.
Because what I found, you know, I was always interested in UFOs as a kid, and I was always staring at the stars, always interested, because I came from there. That's why I understand that now. And I remember being at university, and I met my first ufologist, and he was doing a PhD in ufology, and we were playing snooker, I think, and I was just quizzing him because I was so fascinated that he was doing this as a university course. But what really disappointed me was that it turned out he was really being trained how to disprove everything, and he didn't seem to have any passion about it. It was just like this really dry academic thing that he was doing, and I was kind of disappointed, you know. And he had the long hair and everything else, and And as I carried on, I just, I always found myself getting, every time I saw one, I'm still the same. I do it now. I was doing it the other night. I called them in. They put in a show, and I'm like shouting, and I'm ringing friends, and I'm like, look at this, look at this, look at this. And most people, even my kids now, are just like, oh, another UFO.
Great.
But all my kids have seen them, and I've told them not to be afraid, and I've told them to, one of my boys, actually, I said this on a show the other day, told the story when I was living in Morocco, in North Africa. He told us about the story that he got taken up on a ship, and it was like a mantoid, like he drew a picture of it, like an insect. Yeah. And he told how they were really nice, and they made him a cup of tea. And I brought this up on a show the other day, and somebody said, maybe he's in a program. And I was like, oh yeah, maybe he is. Yeah. Because I've had flashbacks as well to things in the last couple of years. And it actually makes life more exciting and more interesting. Because what I say to my children is exactly what you say to people who've been, who are witnesses. And so, well, you're okay, aren't you? Well, if that did happen, and I believe my children, and I say, well, okay, yeah, but you're okay, you're fine. Aren't you lucky?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You mentioned the mantid. Can I comment on that?
Please do.
Okay. Dr. Richard Sauter, and I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
I've got his books here.
Yeah. Okay. So do I. And I think it was I may get the date a little wrong, but it isn't much. I think it was 1984 in December. He and maybe you've read of this incident. It's in his book Kundalini Tales. You have his book Kundalini Tales.
I'm not sure I've got that one.
I think you'd remember if you did.
Yeah.
You read it. At any rate, what happened was he's coming awake, and there are two insectoids, wanting to talk. And what they are telling him. Now, this is back in the 80s, before we knew about GMOs, at least out in the public. He told him that there was research going on at a major university in the US, which begins with the letter H, into genetic engineering that would be harmful for humans. So they were warning him. And, he's thinking in his own mind, they really look chitinous, which would be insectoid. And they're communicating back, and you look very mammalian. This kind of stuff. So, I just wanted to drop that in there because, we are, the hybrids, in effect, we're GMOs.
Well, according to Alex Collier and numerous other people, we're made up of 22 different species of ETs anyway.
Well, that might be, that's Mr. Collier's, information. I'm, hey, that's above my pay grade. I'm not, I'm an investigator, not only of other people's happenings, but of my own. And, hey, and I realize that he has indicated this. And that could well be, because after all, in our dairy herd, we were doing artificial insemination.
Yeah.
There could be 3 parents, or maybe even 4, depending on what is part of the mix.
That's weird, because when I went to the States first time, or the first few times that I went to the States, I worked for a guy that ran a genetics company. And the second time I went, I was selling bull semen. So the 2 things you just mentioned, I actually
and we may have been buying it.
Yeah. Well, this was an interesting cow called the Belgian Blue.
Okay, was it it wasn't a dairy herd? Was it a beef herd? Or?
Yeah, the big sales pitch on it was that it created meat with less fat than chicken, but the problem with that was that you needed heated sheds for it, because it didn't have enough fat to stay warm at night, so it cost a fortune to rear them. Yeah, that was funny. But that's a genetically engineered cow. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There's nothing new.
Yep. It's
Isn't that funny?
well, getting back to your friend at university who was doing, doing the paper for his PhD. It sounds like he was trying to be very objective. I don't know if he was, but some people who say that they want to be objective can actually cross over the line and eliminate points that they know they can't connect all the dots, but they're still willing to be a little too conservative. There are some photos, that were taken in California recently, and whatever was up in the sky deliberately presented a pink appearance and maintained and did not, and by the way, did not move its location for 1 hour. And maybe not even then, but of course by then it went invisible. But the pink, the witness sat and observed for an hour, and the pink was maintained for 45 minutes. Now I've had a case where, and there are many, of course, by other researchers, where the UFO deliberately makes a sound initially to get the attention of the witness.
Yeah.
And then goes silent.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, hey, the sound was only used. Now, in this particular case, it looks like that the pink was used and it stayed pink for 45 minutes. And then it went into white. And the last 5 minutes were then the gradual disappearing of the outer whatever, whether it was a cloud-like thing that they were using to demonstrate what they were actually, they've said to those on board, we can be right above your head and you don't know it. I think it was 2005. I was at a conference in Denver at the time. And at this conference, this film that had been taken back in 1989 by an educator in Pennsylvania, in the daytime, he was out in his yard. This disc came overhead at about 2,000 feet estimate, and it did not leave. Obviously wanted to be seen. It was presenting and saying, okay, look at me. So he had time to go in the house, get his, what was known as camcorders in those days, and come right outside and do the film, and did not know until later that when he slowed the film down, that at one point, the UFO went invisible very briefly and then became visible again. And in that mix was a bird that seemed to be flying up toward the UFO before it became invisible. And the UFO and the bird went invisible. And then the UFO became visible again first, and then the bird is seen dropping. Now, it's not known whether the bird was dead or just, it's just, it was a deliberate thing, much as the current case that I've been heavily involved in California that, showed the pink. And so just something, to note that they can use various means to get your attention. In the Winnemucca, Nevada motel room, it was like a monumental energy was coming right toward me. Nothing to hurt me or anything like that. It was like, hey, wake up. But, there was no verbal articulation or anything like that. But it's like, hey, you're going to wake up.
Yeah, well, I've been talking about UFO sightings of my own on social media and YouTube for years, and people kept saying the same thing to me. Why don't you get a camera? Why? Because And I've never really been interested in filming them. I've just been like, because it's too much of an interest. It's too much of a beautiful experience. But in April, I was we had a warm spell, and I was in the garden every night for about a week, out by the fire, and that's what they did to me. They blinked in the sky, and then they sat there. And what I felt was, oh, they're waiting for me to film them, so I filmed them.
Yeah.
And I filmed them every day for 4 or 5 days, and then I put those up on Telegram and YouTube, and that was it. It's the last time they've asked me to do it, but they did it. I felt it. They wanted me to film them.
You bet. They actually engineered that. And if they had not wanted you to film, your camera would not have worked.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. Temporarily.
Yeah. I
because
felt that.
This has been shown. The same thing on radar. They've been clocked on radar when they wanted to be clocked on radar. Yeah. But there can be witnesses standing on the ground, and you might, and that you could have radar right beside them. And if they did not want to appear on that radar, they could prevent it. But at the same time, the witnesses would see.
Yeah.
So there you go.
I get that very much, and I could talk to you about cases all day. But what I'd like to move on to is, after all these years of investigating, and this expansion in your own consciousness and knowledge about yourself, and meeting multiple different species of aliens, what do you think's actually happening in terms of this disclosure? Do you think? I mean, I feel like they want us to talk about it. They're speeding that up. It feels like it's time, and people are getting prepared to learn more about it, which is why I think we're having this conversation. But of course, there's all the other talk about soft disclosure, partial disclosure, Project Bluebeam, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah.
Where are you at with all of that, Beverly?
Okay. In December of 2017, it became very clear that on the Earth side of disclosure, they were kind of being, shall we say, forced by, maybe kind of an increasing public awareness of UFOs to say something. And so we had this gentleman from the CIA, and more than one gentleman, several, who came out into the public, and they saw to it that the New York Times, big article, Politico, etc. Well, right then, of course, it became quite apparent by the way that he was telling the story of what they had investigated that a big spin narrative was now heavily in motion. That is still current today, and it extends into the hearings, for instance, and any public pronouncements or any shows that this particular CIA individual may have participated in, on a channel or whatever. And so you have a spin narrative. Now, it's wise, of course, in my estimation, to remember what Werner von Braun, a very knowledgeable gentleman who was brought over here during Operation Paperclip, what he said back in the 70s to his assistant.
She had beautiful white hair when I last saw her.
Yes, that's right. Carol Rosin.
Carol, yeah.
Yeah, Rosin. And what he told her, and what I think she is still talking about today, thank goodness, is that there was the move afoot to label, various threats in order to keep the general population stirred up, etc., shall we say. And, terrorists, for instance, asteroids may be going to hit us, for instance, nations of concern, that may have been a problem to a certain organization, with 3 letters. And he said, and the last thing they'll pull, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he was very plain about it, they'll pull is the alien threat. And that is what we are seeing today. As a matter of fact, the program that was brought out as into the public's awareness in 2017 had an acronym AATIP, and the T stood for threat.
Yep.
So, and then Werner von Braun, in finishing up his statement to Carol Rosen, said, when he said about the alien threat, and he said, and it's a lie.
Yep.
I give him credit, Some would say he was a Nazi, etc. Well, yeah, he was in Nazi Germany, of course. But it appears to me that in the 70s, he was trying to tell a very important truth. So, Now, did I stay on point?
Well, I mean, that's why it's so widespread, the knowledge that this fake alien invasion would be the biggest cut. I mean, if you to bring in a new world order, it seems to be like the existential threat from outside the Earth is a great way of doing it. And they have holographic technology. I mean, they show us this technology in the movies all the time. Like the previous Spider-Man film had this technology in with the holograms and the drones and the weapons and directed energy weapons and everything else. I mean, they could definitely do that. I was just wondering, because there's also this split in the UFO community, what I'd call the UFO community. I have nothing to do with it, but the one that I observe, and that is between those that want the limited hangout partial disclosure, and there's people like Stephen Greer pushing for full disclosure.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, then this comes into the mainstream world when you have Donald Trump Jr. interviewing his dad and asking him directly about UFOs, and which I thought was great. Donald Trump's answer was fantastic. And then you've got nasty people like Hillary Clinton's campaign manager talking about Ancient and being involved with Ancient Aliens, the TV show, which obviously, so you've got all these levels of misinformation,
right?
And right in the center of that, for me, I have my personal experience, which has always been really positive, and it's getting more positive as every day goes by. So I know that I'm pretty sure that I'm not being communicated with by CIA secret hidden technology. It's something else. So
absolutely.
So I was just wondering, with all your experience, what your opinion is on what's going to happen in this respect.
When I go out to speak, whether it's small groups or large groups, it might be 3 people or it might be 300. But I get that there is, and of course I'm calm. I mean, about the whole thing, and I'm trying to give case information, as well as, in later years, like now. Actually, I didn't, for some years, I didn't reveal that I was, experiencing. But anyway, I find that people are very interested in the subject.
Yeah.
And that I'm not challenged very much. And when I am, that's okay, because I can speak to that, and however. And so I think there's I think if we can get some of the truth out about what's happening on this planet, that there can be how shall I say, an easier acceptance or realization of what in reality has been happening for not only thousands of years, but millions, undoubtedly, on this planet, because we're not the first civilization.
No, of course
on
not.
the planet by any means. And
absolutely not.
No, that's right. So I think, and just as an incidental, when I said about the calm, because I am calm, and people tend to listen to what I'm saying. I don't want an audience to stop thinking. I could go out there and tell certain things and make them stop thinking in front of an audience. I don't want to do that. I want them to keep on thinking and inquiring, so that they can better understand what reality is all about. I'm not only involved in the UFO experiencer thing, but of course, ever since the 60s, when the doors opened, I've been into the paranormal and so on. And you probably know about the Monroe Institute in Eastern US. People go there from all over the world. It's an exploration in consciousness. And it was established back in the 70s by this very successful media executive, Robert Monroe, with the Old Mutual Radio Broadcasting Company. Oh, he's very successful. He wrote shows like The Shadow and that sort of thing, At any rate, he began to spontaneously go out of the body. And he thought he was going nuts, of course, and, found out he wasn't, began to control it. And he was a very inquiring person, which we all need to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I've been there a number of times for their 5-day programs and so on. And I always emphasize when I even mention the Monroe Institute, they do not tell you what to think nor how to think. So, and when you go, you're in a small group, and you might be there with an Australian rancher or a Montreal bond trader. Well, and the first time I was there were 3 doctors in the group. And also a fellow from the Pentagon, by the way. But anyway, so it's so important to know, I always add this, of course, so important to know the difference between the paranormal and UFO screen memories. So the screen memory thing is very, very important. I ran into an incident recently where while the individual was watching the anomaly that was in the air, on the ground, in her driveway, where she was initially standing with her husband and son, a hawk flew down, landed about 10 feet away from him, showed no fear, and then walked into the garage, the open garage. And they're thinking, what? And it made its way up, went into a corner first, and then up on this, I think it was a freezing unit. And at that point, she's seeing this thing up in the air, and she's saying to her husband and son, look, what's up in the air? And they look up and they say, oh yeah, that's really weird. And they go right back to trying to solve the problem with the hawk. And what happened? They think their perception is not always the real. But their perception was that they took the pool stick, and the hawk very obligingly came onto the pool stick and allowed itself to be carried outside and then flew off. So you have one anomaly on the ground, and you've got another anomaly up in the air. Now, what was the, so of course, there's a possibility that what was happening on the ground was a screen memory to divert the husband and son, because it was the mother and wife who was really being approached and targeted and so on. Very interesting scenarios. The screen memory thing, and this is just a good example. The father and son, this happened back in '97 when the son was a teenager. But anyway, they went, hunting on a winter afternoon with fresh snow. Mm-hmm. And then they coming up over a rise, looking down along a creek bed, and there's a wolf dashing back and forth almost frantically. And then the wolf left the area. The father is saying, "Did you see that? What did you see?" "Well, I saw a wolf." And so they were inquiring enough, of course, to go down and check for tracks in that fresh snow. Then you know what I'm going to say next. There were no tracks. Mm-hmm. It was a screen memory. Something totally different was taking place. Totally. But it was presented, as I would say rather considerately, so that that father and son would realize that they're involved in a reality beyond what they had formerly contemplated. And when they discovered that they could not connect all the dots, then a larger reality presented itself in a kind of a way as to not overwhelm, but at least get the individual to thinking in broader terms. So,
yeah,
you know.
that's the first time I've heard the term screen memory, but it makes sense.
Oh, it's important. And
Yeah.
There are times when I'm on board that they're utilizing me as a very, very, very junior element in the equation of whatever's happening in order to calm other people down. Okay, I give you this example. And I was awake at the time, I was conscious. This happened on November 26th of 2019. And, and somehow they facilitated getting me in a conscious level on board, because a friend of mine was in this lineup of 100 people on board. And I know that she's very skittish about, or has been anyway. I think that's changing somewhat. And but very skittish about, because she knows she's had encounters, that she knows, and very, very skittish about it. So, they facilitate me on board, conscious, and of course I'm good-naturedly interacting with, looking over, and I even began to count the ones in the lineup, and I just thought, hey, no need to count. There's 100, at least 100 of them here, including her. She's standing in line with the rest, you see. And so, the calming down element, but they understand that there are, now that doesn't mean that they can't exercise a control, but obviously if they want all of us to learn, maybe they want me to learn, something about calming people, and it just, there can be, multiple, they can be into multiple operations with multiple people, perhaps at the same time. Hey, what do I know? I'm trying to figure things out just like everybody else is.
Well, you've just been at it for a little bit longer than most people.
Yeah, well, maybe, but hey, I was a late bloomer, I'll tell you. It took me a long time at an advanced stage before I really got really serious, because, and then, and I've had 30 years already, and I'm still at it,
Well, it's never too late. What I want to touch upon, I haven't got long left, but to chat. Hopefully a lot longer left in life, but not to chat.
Yeah, right.
The things like cattle mutilations and abductions.
Okay.
Have you had many cases like that?
I've been told, as a matter of fact, a cousin of mine, and this was back in the 90s, I mentioned to him, and he said, and in his county where he was sheriff, yeah, he said, we've had some of those, but I never investigated that personally. Now, crop formations, yeah, we had some in Iowa, and I was involved a bit, on that level, and they were definitely anomalous.
Yeah,
you couldn't explain, and so on and so forth. Now, okay, I did a case, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I was asked to do it. I was at that time an investigator for MUFON. And even though I had private cases coming to me directly who did not want to go through an organization, this did go through that organization. And I was asked to interview a Iraqi veteran who had had an incident happen in 2004 in Iraq. He was at a forward operating base at Baqaba, which I think is about 30 miles somewhat north of Baghdad. And at that time, he was guarding an area that was right next to an old Iraqi base. And the buildings were somewhat dilapidated. It was just unused, of course. And it was only about 600 feet from where he was on guard duty. And so I think this happened around 11 at night. This disc came over that dilapidated area and hovered for about 10 minutes. And of course, he put it in his report. And so next morning, the platoon went over into that area just to investigate around and see, if there was anything they could find out about what had been reported. And what they found was 37 female dogs with only about a 2-inch slit in the abdominal area, and all the organs in all of those bodies had been removed.
Mm-hmm.
There was only that 2-inch slit.
Yep.
So, of course, and there's been cattle mutilations. In 1998, I was asked to go up to South Dakota and talk with some farmers up there. And, this one farmer, and they were really upset, that neighborhood. This one farmer had an 1,800-pound bull, which had, during a night when there had been sightings of UFOs in the neighborhood, by the way, that looked like it had been, and I only saw the photos on this because I was asked to go up there several, days after it happened. It looked like the bull had been dropped straight down onto 4 strands of barbed wire and mashed him to the ground, of course, with his weight. There was no blood on the bull, no blood on the ground, no tracks on the ground, nothing. See, out of the air. Now, about a half mile away, there was a cow that had been mutilated, and the cow was still lying there on the ground. And coyotes, a lot of coyote dens in that area, and the coyotes they told me, would not touch the bull, and they wouldn't touch the cow either. So there was some, residual thing there that, now, that's on the minus side of things. But of course, I've got cases which are monumentally beneficial, where, the Vietnam case that I've spoken about to others, back in 1971, next to an ammo dump that, or I should say an ammo storage that blew up on the coast of Cameron Bay.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, the guy, well, he thinks the oxygen was sucked out of his body. So that would have meant that probably he was dead initially, and immediately there was a huge UFO in the area, and some kind of an entity came down from it and deflected the explosive power from him. And then when they, after 45 minutes of being unconscious on the ground, he's fine with nothing wrong with him, nothing. And he was only about 60 feet away from the ammo storage,
mm-hmm.
Which should have been a real, well, anyway, that's a plus and the minus.
Yeah.
Extreme, rather extreme cases, but hey.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really miss them.
Well, and you have to acknowledge that, and still understand that there is obviously a great energy from the ETs for us to step up to the plate. And, they've been very frank about saying, we can save the planet, but you're the ones that have to make it habitable.
Yeah.
And we know Fukushima, et cetera, every second it's been spewing radiation since 2011 in March. So we're misusing energy, and they're telling us that.
Yep.
So here we are.
Have you written all this stuff down in a book, or got a website that we can share with people?
I don't have a website. I'm just a frontline investigator, and now of course I've got a lot of files, and I've written and recorded as best I can my experiences that I'm aware of, etc., and have a list and all that kind of stuff. But hey, no book, but nothing. Well, I've had articles published, but maybe, but other than me profiting, forget that.
Well, no, I'm not thinking necessarily of you profiting, although that's a nice sideline. I'm thinking of
and I'm not out to.
I know, but I'm thinking like, for people that want to read what you've done. I mean, you must have
Well,
piles of it.
You're giving me an opportunity to express and hope that some kind of a dialogue gets set up in people's minds.
Yeah.
That's a little broader and that's the best that I can.
Well, that's the key takeaway is experience a reality slightly bigger than the one that you start.
You got it. Yeah. Start getting out of that box, out of that matrix.
Yeah.
Out of the confining, there's always going to be those who want to control the others. And so, hey, we're working to dispel that.
Well, you're living proof, and it's wonderful to spend this hour with you. I've got to go and do fatherly duties now, but it was lovely to speak to you, Beverly.
I've enjoyed it tremendously, Mark. Thank you very much.
You have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you again soon.
I will. Thanks.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody.